Hey guys, so the topic of revision has been coming up in the last couple of days for me, and I don't think I ever made a video here about my own personal recent experience with revision. And Neville Goddard says that this is, if he could give you one thing, it would be revision, which for him, a part of what he talks about revising any event that was unpleasant for you, but he also says to, at the end of every day, literally every day, revise the entire day to have gone the way you would have wanted. Now that takes a disciplined person, somebody more disciplined than myself. I have not gotten to the point yet where I do that. But and when I first started this channel, I was making some videos about how I had gone back essentially, which is basically the same thing. I mean, it has the same effect. It's not exactly revision, but it accomplishes the objective that revision accomplishes. And I was going back into my life, into my past, into these like painful experiences or formative experiences, and looking at what I think I took from them, mainly the bad things that I think I took from them. Like, what did I take from this teenage experience that is still influencing me to this day? Things were just coming up, like memories were coming up during this time, and I was looking at them just saying, well, interesting. I kind of decided this about myself from that, and looking at it now, I don't really think that's true. And then it just kind of, that thing that I was thinking about myself just kind of stopped being there. And so I've got a few videos about that in the beginning, I think, still on this channel. But I recently did like the actual Neville Goddard technique of revision. By recently, I mean like a year ago, about certain events that happened with my dad when he was dying. Like, for example, his actual death was pretty traumatic. I won't go into it. His actual death was not super peaceful. It was as peaceful as it could be, and it was in a controlled environment, but it was not a I love you kids, goodbye. It was not that. That's not how death really happens, apparently. Not at all. And so I went back for that particular scene that night, and I just kind of envisioned the whole night going differently in my mind. I just imagined it. I just imagined it happening. I put myself there and experienced something else in my mind about that actual event. Because it was something that kept coming up. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of watching somebody die, or I had previously had experience with this from having put pets down, my cats, who I loved very much. And one thing I've noticed was common with all three of them was the actual death scene just replayed. It was like it was on a loop in my mind. It just kept playing, like from start to finish. We'd get to the end, right back to the beginning, and it would just play nonstop. Even if I wasn't thinking about it, it just kept playing. It was pretty creepy. It was that was a commonality with all three, just exactly the same. Just the death scene over and over. So I went to that exact thing and revised it, as I was just saying, and it put that to a stop. That's not normally something that I would feel the need to do. There are things that I just don't think you need to mess with, and that's one of them, generally. You process grief the way you process it. And for me, allowing that to just kind of happen it's not something I fight against or resist. But a few weeks after my dad died, I did that just to see what would happen. And it stopped it. It stopped it from continuing to replay. And I stopped thinking about that as much. It did not completely remove the event from my mind. It did not stop me completely from revisiting it, but it took the edge off when I did revisit it. There are some people in this community that will tell you that if you revise an event, it actually revises the past, and that people will then remember the event the way you have revised it. And I want to tell you that everybody in my family totally remembers every detail of what happened that night. So I just want to disabuse you of that notion. Is it possible that maybe somebody has revised something and then other people remember it differently? I guess, but that's not what this is. It's about removing the effect that it had on you, so that the effect that it had on you doesn't then have an effect on your world and continue to influence people and events. That is the purpose of revision, and it's very effective. I also revised other things about his death. Since it happened before COVID vaccines, and when the hospital situation, I don't know how it is now, but before COVID vaccines, the hospitals were just like, at least in his area, were just like jails. I mean, you couldn't get anywhere near anybody without being vetted and checked and everything, which I understand. But you also couldn't have visitors in the hospital. You couldn't have more than one visitor at a time. My dad was only able to have one visitor for 1 hour every day that he was in the hospital. And he spent, of the last 2 months of his life, he spent about 3 weeks in the hospital. And most notably, the week leading up to his death, because he came out of the hospital, came home, and basically died instantly the same day. But for the week leading up to his death, unfortunately, he was in the hospital and he was not doing well. The other times he'd been in the hospital, he was at least like stabilized and okay. This last week leading up to his death, where they could do less and less for him, he wasn't doing well and there was nobody there. And that just really killed me. And you can see me talking about it now. Having revised it, it just changes how you feel about it. It removes all those emotions that were in the scene. So when you go back to think about it, it just kind of seems like a movie. It doesn't seem like some vivid experience that happened to you when you have revised it and relived a different, better scene. So what I did with that was, I just imagined, first of all, we didn't know he was going to die when he did. So I was 1,000 miles away for that last week. I revised myself going down there when he went into the hospital that last time, and just at least being in the area. That was something that really bothered me. It doesn't even really matter that I wasn't there. You know what I mean? I would have just been hanging out outside the hospital anyway, but at least I would have been there. In my mind, I just felt like, oh, I should have been there. So I revised myself being there, which took away all of those feelings of guilt, because it's like I experienced actually doing it. It's really weird how this works. If you don't do it yourself, you might never know. So I revised that. And I also revised the hospital, just allowing him to have as many people as he wanted. I imagined him never being alone, other than when he wanted to be. During that last week, I imagined all the people that he loves being there. My mom, who was his ex-wife, but who was like his childhood sweetheart, and who they were married for like 30 years. I imagined her being down there. She wasn't able to go down there and see him again ever because of COVID, because her current husband is a high-risk COVID person. So she just opted not to go down there while he was dying, which also, that just fucking sucked to me. While he was dying, she called me and she said, "Oh, play this song, put this song on the stereo." It was their wedding song, and he heard it, and so that really killed me that those two never got to like see each other, even talk. I don't think they really even talked again once he started really getting bad. So I revised all that stuff, and so it doesn't have this like that tearing feeling of sorrow and grief, and it really takes the edge off all that stuff. When you just experience things in your mind the way that you wish they would have been. And when you do this, and when you see, hopefully, when you see how this affects you, this is yet another piece of evidence that what you're experiencing is in your mind. It's not what's really happening out here in 3D. It's not what appears to be happening in 3D. It's not, this whole thing, I don't know, the more I live, the less this seems real at all. When you can affect it just by changing how you think about it, how real is it? Like, there's no objective reality. It's all being shaped by you, by your perception, by where you're coming from, which is why focusing on anything other than you is just, to me, crazy. It's just crazy. And I realize a lot of people have to focus on things other than themselves to get to the point where they realize that they have to focus on themselves. So, all's well that ends well. No judgment. I just, I see people going after things or trying to make things happen in a certain way. And it's just, I guess, it's probably just kind of like watching myself doing that, for like 20 years before really figuring out, what's really happening here, who this is really about. what all this really is. Anyway, so revision. You just take something that's causing you pain. If you have a memory that you go back to over and over again, I know a lot of people have this. You know, when people tell you the same story over and over again, something happened to them, you know, in that scene. That's what I've noticed. You know how people tell you, like, you'll be like, you already told me this story. You've told me this story 10 times. And they like don't even realize it. They're like, oh, I did. You know, like that was an impactful moment in that person's life. If they could go back and revise that, live it some other way, you know, assuming it's something that impacted them negatively, that would change. That story would stop being told. Whatever they took from that would shift. So it's an interesting concept, something that I would encourage you to do. If you know, and this doesn't have to be something that you do in a state akin to sleep. You could be sitting in your car in a parking lot and just sit back and close your eyes and go back to that scene and allow yourself the pleasure of imagining it to be exactly how you would have wanted it to be. And just experience that for the fun of it. Really, that's all it is. Just experience it for the fun of it. And then you'll see the after effects, maybe. You know, sometimes these things can be really subtle, change things very subtly. But certainly if you relive an impactful event in a more positive way, it will have an effect. You can count on that. You can count on that, and you will count on that when you see something that does have an immediate impact being you know, something that you revise having an immediate impact. That's when I think you start to put two and two together and say, well, the things that I can't necessarily see some big thing doesn't mean they're not doing something important. Something small but significant. So anyway, I hope that helps somebody. Have a great day.